To modern people, the ancient Romans seem deeply superstitious. There are stories abound of their peculiar beliefs, and some have echoes in the traditions of today. Shakespeare's famous warning by a soothsayer to Julius Caesar of his assassination, "Beware the Ides of March," is still quoted by people today, even if they only vaguely know what the Ides were. And in case you don't know, the Ides were the middle day of a month, so that's March 15th, the date of Caesar's murder in 44 BC. With that said, here are some unusual ancient Roman superstitions and what they may have meant. Carrying a bride over the threshold. Many Romans considered it bad luck not to observe the tradition of a groom carrying his new bride over the threshold of her new house, according to a folklore compilation at Dartmouth College, and this is still practiced after many wedding ceremonies today. The idea was to prevent the bride from tripping on her first entry, which supposedly would have angered the spirits that protected that particular home, such as the domestic deities called penates. Roman tradition attributed the practice to a founding myth of the city, often called the rape of the Sabine women. The word rape comes from the Latin word raptio, meaning abduction. According to the version of the story told by the Roman historian Livy, Rome was founded in about the 8th century BC by mostly male bandits, who then raided the villages of their neighbors, the Sabines, to abduct women to be their wives. And so the tradition of a groom carrying his bride over the threshold was said to represent the bride's reluctance to become a Roman wife and her desire to stay with the family of her father. The city limits. Ancient Rome had formal city limits, bounded by a strip of land called the Pomerium. No one was allowed to build in this area, which was marked by sacred stones called Sippi. As the city grew, the Pomerium was extended and new Sippi were added to delineate it. Breaking conventions inside the Pomerium was considered a serious offense to the gods. No weapons were allowed here, although priests gave dispensations for the bodyguards of magistrates and soldiers taking part in one of the many triumphs granted by the Roman Senate, which meant old men and was a ruling assembly of hundreds of the wealthiest citizens, to the military commander or emperor who'd won a victory. In particular, magistrates of the city, the officers elected for a year for various tasks, including the consuls who held the highest posts in the Roman Republic, were required to consult what was called the city's auspices, or Auspicia Urbana, whenever they crossed the Pomerium. This was a small ceremony by a priest, supposedly foretelling good or bad luck, which according to superstition could be fatal to neglect. The Roman politician and author Cicero relates that in 163 BC, the consul Tiberius Gracchus forgot to take the city auspices a second time after crossing the Pomerium twice in the same day, and that his failure led to the sudden death of an official who was collecting votes. Augury. Augury was the practice of divining the future by studying the behavior of birds, such as the direction they flew or how many there were. Many Romans took augury very seriously, and it featured prominently in the affairs of the Roman state. The 1st century AD Roman natural philosopher Pliny the Elder attributed the invention of augury to a mythological Greek king, but historians note that the ancient Egyptians had a similar practice. Augury was performed by specialist priests called augurs. The idea was that the behavior of birds reflected the will of the gods manifested in the natural world, so the will of the gods could therefore be determined by carefully watching the behavior of birds, according to Pliny. A myth written down by a 2nd century AD Greek and Roman historian Plutarch tells that Romulus, the legendary founder of Rome, and his twin brother Remus resolved an argument over where to site the city by observing the flight of birds. Remus saw 6 vultures, but Romulus saw 12. So the city was built where Romulus wanted, around Palatine Hill. Augury was integrated into the official religion of pagan Rome, and the auspices of augury were consulted at times of national crises and war. An 18th century French history based on classical sources records that Roman priests kept a flock of sacred chickens, which supposedly reflected the will of the gods by feeding on the grain given to them. If the sacred chickens ate it heartily while stamping their feet, then the augury was favorable. But if they refused to eat it, the augury was bad. The history notes that if a positive augury was sought, the sacred chickens might not be fed for a while first. And with that, we've reached the end of the video. What do you think about these superstitions? Comment down below. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again in the next video.